Hey everybody, welcome to this week's talk. I have been sort of wrestling today with what to share. I got some really good insight into the story where Jesus has an encounter with someone, and then I started allowing myself to be more available to God throughout today and just letting him shift my plan. And you know, I've been talking about this word intentionality, and we're looking at ways that now Jesus has been intentional and encounters that he had. And God kind of reminded me, like, Greg, why don't you share some of the encounters that you have living your life more intentional? What does that mean? I've explained it, but I'll go ahead and just give you the Reader's Digest version. Being intentional means that I'm surrendering my plan and I'm being intentional to look for God's hand, look for God's direction in the people that he places in my path. And so I call it purity and availability, right? If I'm listening, if I'm seeking God and I'm not cluttering myself with all kinds of other things, well, that's one thing, to be pure with God, to listen. But then the other thing is to be available to God. This is the intentionality part. And I thought, well, let me just spend this talk sharing what that looks like in my life, in the hopes that you will go, oh, well, I can do that. That doesn't really sound too complicated. Because I think sometimes you guys look at us as leaders or pastors and you're like, well, you're really gifted. Like, you have this big thing. No, we're all the same. We all have the same opportunities day in and day out. It's really just more a boldness or an understanding or an awareness or a surrender to allow God to use us in certain ways. And by the way, don't feel guilty or anything. Feel encouraged that God is going to and wants to and chooses to use you in really unique ways. And so I thought I'd just share 3 encounters that I had this week about being available to God. So last weekend before last, I took several men away on an overnight retreat in Orlando. And really the purpose for that is we've been unpacking this idea that all of us have a worthiness issue, right? We do. We don't know our value, or we take that question of, am I valuable, to our jobs, to our wives, to our activities. And so I've been really kind of talking about that worthiness that you can only really receive from God gets in the way of you being able to follow God, because you are seeking that worthiness out of something else. So there's always an ulterior motive to your relationships. And so I was very intentional. I took these guys away really to unpack some of that. It was a fantastic weekend. I was pretty tired coming out of that weekend, but I came home. And, you know, my wife, obviously, and I haven't been together for the weekend. And so she had planned a little mini staycation, because we got this free 2-night stay at a newer hotel down in St. Pete. Well, it was a really old hotel, but they're renovating it. And anyways, she got invited. You have to sit through one of those little presentations. I'm like, we can sit through the presentation, say no all day long. Let's go enjoy some time together, especially since I've been away. So the intentional part was saying, you know, I had a lot to do. I had a lot that I felt like I needed to still accomplish, catch up on from being gone on the weekend. But this is more important. I'm going to be intentional. I'm going to spend time with my wife. So we go, and you get sort of like assigned to a tour guide to show you the property. And it's this older gentleman. He's a former pilot, and he's kind of retired. And this is sort of something that he does, I guess, for fun and to make extra money. And so, you know, we didn't not get to know him because we were scared that if we get too friendly with him, he's going to convince us to spend money. We're going to probably say no. I mean, unless it's a fantastic deal, but probably going to say no. We've been through these things before. But we got to know the guy, and we got to know him a little bit, heard a little bit of his story. He was a pilot from Air France, and, you know, they had a little gathering the night before and a little dinner, and it was nice. And so we went and hung out, and then we had to meet him the next day for a presentation. So we meet him for this presentation, and we're both prepared, like, hey, you're saying no, right? You know, you got to do that. But we didn't walk into it just blowing off the whole thing. We cared about this gentleman. And in the beginning of his presentation, he kind of shares a little bit more of his story, and then he shares about this book that he wrote about being a pilot that back in the 80s was flying a plane and got held hostage and had to fly and land the plane in Beirut. And he's like, and anyways, and he's going to move on to the next slide. And both Felicia and I really felt stirred to like, wait, time out. You need to tell us more about that. He was going to get onto his presentation. And as we kind of pause the business side of things and pay attention to the relational side, we're like, we want to hear your story. He tells us this incredible story of not only having his plane held hostage, having to land in Beirut at night on a runway that was no longer serviceable, and then being confined to an underground cell by himself for 9 months. We were blown away because this guy was very jovial. He was very happy. And so we were like, well, tell us a little bit more. And at this point he had asked what I do. And I told him I was a pastor and a pastor for Jesus. And so you could tell there was like a little twinkle in his eye about that. And he said, well, let me tell you what happened to me in that hole. He said, I obviously was in despair. And he said, I kind of just heard this voice, this inner voice that's told me, hey, if you want to survive, you need to listen to me. You need to survive. In order to survive, you need to follow me. He knew that the voice was God, but he didn't know much more than that. And then he said, well, how am I gonna hear from you, God? And he says, in my word. You're gonna learn in the Bible. You're gonna learn more about me in my word. He goes, well, I'm in a holding cell by myself with a bunch of Muslims. They're not going to give me a Bible. And he goes, if you don't ask, you don't receive. And so he asked these men if he could have a Bible. And he said within like an hour, they brought him a Bible into the cell. And so he started listening. He had no other choice. He's in confinement. He started listening to God, came to know the voice as Jesus. Jesus revealed himself to him. And he became sort of a pastor, even to the guards that were there with him, so much so that as he ministered to these guards, they were like, well, geez, we want to go look for this Jesus ourselves. We can't do this anymore. And these 5 guys left and left the camp. The very next day, he said the Americans came and they had this, I don't know if you remember back in the 80s, they had this big military operation to free all these hostages. Those 5 guys would have been killed if it hadn't been for this guy, Antoine, who ministered to them and got them to leave. Or they left on their own, but he inspired them to leave. And it was just this amazing conversation where instead of talking numbers and cents on this travel package he was trying to sell us, we were using the whiteboard to share the same things that I teach you, which is he was in solitude. He had nothing but silence. And so he didn't even have the scriptures, but God spoke to him because he had no other choice. And then when he actually was intentional to receive it and then start reading it in his word, well, God revealed himself in so many different ways. And now this man from France that I never met before and I are writing on the board where God has revealed the same exact truths to both of us. It's just faith building for me as a pastor and for him, even in the job that he's doing, to know that he has purpose beyond selling travel packages. Truly, truly, it was a blessing to both Felicia and myself, and he sent us a copy of his book, which I haven't read yet, but I'm going to read it because I think it's going to be very encouraging. That was one encounter that I had this week. It was just again, being available. Then my wife and I, we went that day and we did some sightseeing. We had dinner and we talked about it and we shared about it and we spent quality time together. See, it didn't disrupt our whole day. It actually made part of our day. We made time for God and to reveal and show us. And now the guy gave me his card, I have his phone number. It's kind of like having a new friend. Another encounter. Some of these you may say well, this is so minor, but to me, minor is good. I don't have to always have like major things happen to me. So we come back on Wednesday, and a lot of times I like to go sit outside to work be in nature and also just to be around people, to have the opportunity that God might have an encounter. And so I went to this coffee shop in Midtown. They have this nice outdoor patio, and I'm going to start working. I got my headphones in. I've got some instrumental music, and I'm sort of just getting through the tasks of that I have to accomplish. And what's interesting, when I got there were 4 guys sitting at this little gathering area, and I kind of overheard some of their conversations, and they were obviously, I could kind of just point them out, like a senior pastor, a worship pastor, and then 2 consultants, kind of in the brick and mortar church model. And they were just talking about things. And I was like, oh, wow, you brought these pastors right here. Like, am I supposed to engage? I just asked God. He's like, no, carry on. They're not here for you. So I just kind of went about my business. I was there for a couple of hours. And, again, people are coming and going. I'm paying attention. I'm working and nothing, which is great. Most days, that's kind of how it is. But then there were these 4 businessmen that came and sat at the table right in earshot of me. And again, I had my headphones in, listening to some instrumental, and wasn't really paying attention. But as they were leaving, I heard one of the guys say, well, I'm originally from Green Bay, Wisconsin. Now, for me, that's like a cue. I'm from Green Bay, Wisconsin originally, and it's not a very big town. When I grew up, it was like 86,000 people in the whole town. And so I was like, oh, that's kind of unique. That's kind of odd. But they're all having a business meeting. I didn't really necessarily feel prompted to go interrupt them or anything, but I was just taking notice, right? So I said to God, God, if you want me to have a conversation with him, you're gonna have to make it obvious. You're gonna have to like bring him right to me, because I don't really know. I got stuff to do. He goes, yeah, that's fine. Carry on. So I just carried on about my work. When these guys finally got up to depart, there's 4 of them. 3 of the guys exited towards the street, and 1 guy exited this way, right towards me, literally walked right past me within 2 feet. And that's when God was like, tell him you overheard that he's from Green Bay, Wisconsin. So I did. I said, hey, did I hear you say you're from Green Bay, Wisconsin? That's where I'm from. He immediately stops. He's like, no way. Where did you grow up? We started kind of sharing stories. Here's the crazy part. I said I was from Green Bay, but I really grew up in a little suburb of Green Bay called De Pere. And then if you want to make it even smaller, it was West De Pere. Anyways, he's telling me he's from Green Bay. We're talking about the Packers, Lambeau Field. And then I said, okay, so where in Green Bay? Where did you go to school? He goes, well, actually, I'm from a smaller town called De Pere. I'm like, I know De Pere. He goes, well, it's even smaller than that. I'm from West De Pere. And I'm like, okay, this is just too, like, coincidental, right? It's not coincidental, but that's what we're thinking. And then he says, what do you do? And that seems to be a trigger that God uses many times to start a conversation about Jesus. And I said, oh, I'm a mobile pastor. I live here, in Tampa now. And he was like, really? Like, kind of tell me more. And so I just gave him kind of like a 90-second version of my story, right? I'm not there to bore the guy to death. I don't know if he's interested, not interested. And he goes, wow, that is so encouraging, because I'm a man of faith. And then he shares something about himself. And it was like, wow, like, okay, I see what God's doing. He needed encouragement today. I needed encouragement today. And here he uses a guy from Green Bay, Wisconsin. Well, he says, hey man, can I have your number? I'm like, which that's not normal either, right? I'm like, here, I'll give you one of my cards. And he grabs my card and he looks at it and he goes, wow, I know that name. I went to school with a Jessica Froelich. Well, lo and behold, Jessica Froelich is my sister. He knows my sister. All sitting in a coffee shop outside, minding my own business in Tampa, Florida, in Midtown. This is kind of how God operates when I'm intentional about being available to God. Did I still get my stuff done that day? Yes, I got it done, most of it, and what I didn't, I moved it into the next day. There's only so much time in each day. And then the final one really was another day. I'm at a Starbucks, and it was actually on a recording day. Actually, it was today, and when this was recorded. And the reason why right now it's late afternoon, I normally would record in the morning, is because God opened up an opportunity to have a conversation with some friends, people that I've known for a long time, that were really going through a very difficult struggle, a very hard struggle in life. And the truth is, I didn't really want to, because I had my plan for the day. So I called another friend of mine and I just shared my heart. Like, hey, I feel like I got things to do. These other friends of mine, I know they need help. They're not really necessarily asking me for help, but I feel like I'm supposed to do something. And he's like, yeah, I feel like you should too. Just reach out to him. So I sent him a text and said, hey, if you can be at the Starbucks where I'm at right now, how soon could you get here? And they texted back, we can be there in 15 minutes, which then prompted this probably hour and a half heartfelt meeting, conversation, friendship, time together where they were able to unpack some things and I was able to really help them with some things, and as the church come alongside of them so that they didn't feel left behind, they didn't feel invalidated. And it was just a very precious time together. It was an intentional time where they said, we need help. They let their day kind of get messed up. I let my day kind of get messed up. See how it's not messed up though? And God did something, and we as the church were able to come alongside of them to help them out of a very difficult situation. This is what intentionality looks like in our lives. It's not always these big, profound things. I'm going to talk next week about an encounter that Jesus had with somebody that had been sick for 39 years. And I'm going to teach a little bit about maybe our perspective and how we need to shift our perspectives. But I'm going to kind of let you guys talk a little bit this week about being intentional in your own lives, and like, where do you struggle to make yourself available to God? Where do you struggle with people and relationships so maybe you're not available or you're not willing to ask God or even to be interrupted in life? I think that's an important thing for us to just be able to unpack, share with one another, because I'm telling you, I'm a richer man by having had each one of these encounters. It makes me into a better person, and then I can see God moving and it builds my faith. This is what I want for your life as well. It's an adventure that we're living in. This is not a boring thing. This is not about trying to follow rules. This is about following the King of Kings, the King of the universe, who invites you into his kingdom business. I can't think of another better purpose in life than that. Enjoy your time together. God bless you.